Hello, I'm Seth for Privacy, and welcome to a special episode of Opt Out. Opt Out's a show where I sit down with passionate people to learn why privacy matters to them, the tools and techniques they've found and leveraged, and where we encourage and inspire others towards personal privacy and data sovereignty. Wanting to find a solid VPN provider, but struggling to break through all of the marketing fluff and grandiose claims? This episode, we're going to sit down with Viktor, a member of the IVPN team, the newest sponsor of Opt Out, to discuss the ethos behind IVPN, their approach to providing privacy to users, and some of the history of IVPN. Welcome on to Opt Out, Viktor.
Hi, thanks for the invitation.
Yeah, I'm so glad to be able to sit down and walk through, I think, some of the common questions and concerns that listeners may have around VPNs. And obviously, IVPN is a service that I've used for a while and really, really enjoyed. But the more that I dig into Yelt's blog posts, the more I dig into the privacy guides that you publish and just see the ethos that goes into the company and the ethos of the people on the team that I've gotten to know. It's just been clear that it's very much a different ball game from the norm in the VPN provider space, which has a lot of bad actors or just companies that kind of misuse the ideal of security and privacy. So glad to sit down and hopefully get some clarity and just invite the listeners to get to know IVPN a little bit more.
Nice. That's quite a glowing feedback. Thanks.
Yeah, I've been very pleasantly surprised. I had been recommended IVPN by a lot of people in the past and got into it and started looking more into it. And I've come away very, very impressed and grateful that there are services out there that seem to care about user privacy beyond just making a quick buck, but really do value that and want to provide a service that protects people's privacy at all costs. So definitely grateful for that.
Yeah, nice.
For those listeners who aren't familiar with you specifically or with IVPN, do you mind introducing yourself and telling us a little bit about what IVPN does?
Sure. So I'm Viktor. I'm from Hungary, and I'm part of the IVPN team for probably 4 years now. I'm doing communications, community, doing special projects. I think I'm going to mention some of them and explain some of them. And IVPN is a privacy-focused VPN provider, and we exist, for the mission of protecting people's privacy through encrypting their traffic and masking their IP address and solving some of the basic problems that you face right now in the digital world with logging of your data and surveillance, essentially.
Awesome. Well, I wanted to get to know a little bit more about kind of your personal privacy journey. So I'm curious what it was that woke you up to the need for personal privacy.
Sure. I've been thinking about this a little bit more since I've started listening to Opt Out, and I have a couple of answers to that. So I used to work in the digital side of the adult industry for a couple of years. Strong libertarian spirit, freedom of speech is very important value there usually. And there was a so-called Operation Choke Point. I'm not sure if you are familiar with that. The US government's different ways of trying to shut down businesses that they've condoned as not very compliant with their ideas of what businesses should be allowed to run. So they've shut down bank accounts, and there were different things happening there. And that really made me raise my eyebrows and think about the implications. So that was one thing. And working in the industry, I was working on generating traffic to websites, improve monetization. And that part really woke me up to the value of the personal data. So after a couple of years, I felt really responsible. I'm part of the problem, not any kind of solution. So I got out of that, and going back a little bit further, I'm from Hungary, as I mentioned before, and secret police and surveillance, that was pretty much the basic thing, up until the end of the 1980s, pretty much like in the East Germany and the Stasi. And I was listening to these stories from relatives who were participating from the both sides, and that it was clear to me that which side I want to be on. So that's roughly the backdrop for it. But the trigger was reading a long obituary about John Perry Barlow, the co-founder of EFF, when he died. and that kind of like opened up a whole like a library of knowledge about EFF and what they're about, and the whole background of the movement, and that really blew me away. And I wanted to join this whole cause really, and IVPN was looking for a person with skill set and background similar to mine, and IVPN was an EFF sponsor even back then, so it was like a great fit at that point. So that's roughly it.
Yeah, it's cool to hear when people who are involved in kind of the other side of the aisle, I guess, but the people who are like helping with data collection and helping to utilize that to like you said, improve monetization or improve hits on a website, that kind of thing. It's always cool to hear when that is part of why people wake up to realizing that need, because obviously you've seen the ins and outs of how that process can work and how that data can be used. So Definitely. Yeah, I love that you've come around after that, and I will have to check out that obituary. I hadn't heard of anyone mentioning that before, so I'm curious to read that and see what jumped out to you. I'll have to learn more about that, but definitely thankful for what
happy to share it.
Yeah, I'll definitely have to give it a read. Thankful for what EFF has done, and just so many people in the space who have dedicated their lives or much of their lives to drive the point of privacy forward, drive the ability for people to reclaim personal privacy forward. So.
Yeah, just to add to that, mm-hmm. I mean, the whole starting point and the first years, there was the Declaration of Independence of Cyberspace by John Pedro, where he really went on about what we need to fight for and what kind of future we want to build, without any kind of interference from the corporate giants and the governments, and I feel like sometimes we are kind of losing that battle. And that makes me amps me up a little bit more, to keep going. So it's a good, historical perspective and things to go back to.
Yeah, great motivation there. And I'm curious what it was that sparked the creation of IVPN. I mean, there's so many VPN providers out there, and they have been for a long time. So I'd love if you can share a little bit about what kind of sparked the creation of IVPN, and
Sure. Yeah, I mean. IVPN was conceived in 2009, and there were far fewer VPNs, and it was founded by a gentleman called Nick Pestle, and he's a lifelong cypherpunk, and he had a pretty similar story like mine in the sense that he had peered into the data collection part but he was working in the financial service industry as an InfoSec analyst, risk analyst, and he was kind of disillusioned by the amount of customer data companies start to collect, analyze it, predict purchasing behavior, all this kind of stuff. So, So he went on and looked for how can we help this issue, and how can we solve at least a part of that. And I think back then, this ISP problem, where the greatest threat really to privacy is ISPs holding a lot of power, seeing all the customer traffic flowing through, and they can tie it to this real persona, whatever personal information or payment information you gave them. They capture it, and they can package it and sell it and share it with anyone. I think that was a huge chunk of the problem 10 years ago. I think a lot of things changed since then, but it's still a very important problem, and we are still focusing on solving that. So most of the VPNs at that time, focused on anti-censorship, security, and then this unblocking of geo-restriction that provided a lot of growth opportunity for a lot of companies and shifted their focus, finding new ways to grow essentially. But IVPN was built for privacy protections, and we have kept that focus ever since then. So that's why you don't really see, we don't do any development, for example, in the unblocking streaming services or whatever. It's some of our customers would like to see that, but we rather focus on the privacy aspects.
Yeah, I definitely agree that the privacy aspects I think are much more important. So I'm glad that that's remained the core focus there. And what is it that separates IVPN from the other VPN providers out there today?
That's a good question. I could talk about this for an hour, I think. A couple of things. I can think about three overarching things there. One is the principles. So we really try to build a service that we will want to use ourselves, and we want to treat customers how we want to be treated, and that's with like honesty, no FUD, no overselling, and there's no like everyone needs a VPN kind of saying like we don't say it provides anonymity and complete privacy and no military grade encryption stuff. So we don't use these kind of things to sell more subscriptions, and we want to stay true to the privacy mission. So no retargeting ads, no data brokers, and Facebook and Google ads, email list buying, all this kind of stuff. I had a discussion about this on Twitter with someone that they were like, companies need to grow, and if you just don't use these tactics, then you won't reach more people. But I argue that like VPN providers, they exist to provide better privacy and essentially sell privacy in some sense. So it's their whole mission, and it has to be their key promise. So if you use these kind of tactics, you sell something and you consistently and constantly undermine it at the same time. And for me, it's mind-boggling. Like there are just a couple of VPN providers that don't have any trackers and don't do Facebook and Google ads. It's debatable, but we would like to keep that part. So that's one. Yeah, slow growth instead of violating privacy. And a second one would be like on the product side, the privacy focus. No email needed for registration. We accept cash and Monero and BTC as well if you can source it anonymously. But that's that's a tricky topic. No third-party tools, as I mentioned. So we don't pass on any information to any parties. We cannot be completely self-sovereign. We are not an ISP. We have some infrastructure partners, but we are very mindful of trying to minimize those cooperations and interactions when it's not absolutely essential. So that's the second. And then the third one is the trust. So really educate people on when you use a VPN provider, you shift trust. So you shift trust from your ISP, and it cannot be proven 100% that the VPN provider is not logging. There is no way to do that right now. You can look for signals like audits and who owns it, transparency, clear privacy policies, and all this kind of stuff. So rent canaries, and whether the software is open source, some other parts are open source. But audits also just like a snapshot in time. We usually highlight that. You cannot verify that code actually runs on the live instance. So I think these are the stuff that came into my mind about what separates. But we also usually say that when I add that IVPN is not the best fit for everyone. It's speeds might vary. App functionality might be different. If you care about some other stuff, if you want a server in your country in, I don't know, some parts of the Middle East that we don't cover, or you really want streaming unblocking, then IVPN is not for you, and that's fine. And not many VPN providers say that. I think. So, yeah.
There are actual limitations. Yeah. Wow.
No, I just want to say, if you don't use IVPN or don't pick IVPN, just use one that you can trust. So I think in my personal view, there is only just a handful of trustworthy providers. I'm not going to name them, but if you pick those that are recommended by people that don't have a financial incentive to do that, and then you can identify those that care about privacy, as you said in the intro, that was pretty good. Not chasing an exit or hockey stick growth, it's not easy to identify those companies, but it's possible. So try them and test them and pick one of those, and then I'll be happy. You don't have to use IVPN.
Yeah, I think the things that really drew me into IVPN were one was just accepting Monero. I think is a clear signal that a company is serious about preserving their users' privacy, because allowing people to pay directly in Monero with no third party, no payment processor, is a huge win for the person who's actually subscribing to the service, because they get a really easy way to maintain their financial privacy while subscribing. Another huge one that is just almost novel to me. I've never seen anyone else do this. I think another VPN provider, Mobot, does it now, but that you didn't require email for signing up just was such a cool system. And so that the end user doesn't have to worry about using some kind of aliasing service or trying to spin up an email just for that, or they don't have to worry about the email privacy side when they're signing up, which I think is also very important. And it just removes an extra burden on the user who's signing up when they're trying to protect their privacy from IVPN, because obviously they don't want y'all to know everything about them.
That helps. That helps. Like, I mean, it helps us, looking at our threat model. But just one note about that. Movat have done that before us. So just want to make it clear. So it's not our innovation.
Yeah. It's just it's a very cool feature. It's not something I had seen before. But the other thing that really drew me in was just looking at the principles that y'all live by and seeing that carried out in your marketing and in your blog posts and in your privacy guides. It became very apparent that, like you talked about, you're not willing to sell users' data. You're not willing to lie to users and tell them that either VPNs do something that they don't, or tell them that IVPN does something that it doesn't. It's just so rare in really any company, but especially in the VPN space, it feels like there's so many providers that are willing to make those grandiose and ridiculous claims about what their VPN service can do in order to pull users in, and then users end up being hurt because they get pulled into a probably logging, data selling, awful VPN provider, and they don't realize it because they're being sold this bill of goods that's just completely false. So the approach that y'all take to messaging and to education has, I think, really set you apart from other VPN providers that I've looked at.
Yeah, that's good to hear. Yeah, we've been working on that for a number of years now to try to highlight these differences and try to work on the education part quite a lot. So sometimes being really vocal and calling out other companies, we don't necessarily want to do that like too much anymore, I guess. But that's an important aspect.
Yeah. Thanks for walking through those three main aspects. Super helpful to hear. And I wanted to give you a chance too, just to share what makes IVPN specifically a powerful tool for users who are taking steps to reclaim their personal privacy.
Generally for VPNs, I think the starting point would be like considering the individual threat models. So your threat model, and like it's just a part of a toolkit, and perhaps, depending on the threat model, perhaps it's not the first step or the first tool that I would recommend, and depending on that threat model, other steps might make more sense to do first, like switching your browser or privacy enhancing extensions. But as far as the VPN part, it's just like really preventing your ISP from like analyzing, logging, selling your data, and really keeping a permanent log of that. So take it cooperate with entities you don't know, trust, like corporate government entities. And if you're also concerned about your IP address being visible to website you visit or services you use, that's also a very good way to do that, is to use a VPN and improve security somewhat on untrusted networks. That part has been improving quite a lot in the recent years with HTTPS and other developments, but it's still something that is useful. So that's generally, and specifically for IVPN, I think just going back to the trust and like the we don't lock part, and we have very strict legal guidelines, and we have kind of figured this out over the years, like what are the things that we can promise and actually carry out, or like actually provide to the customers as these defenses for them. And on the product side, perhaps multi-hop would be an interesting thing to mention, which spreads the risk around multiple jurisdictions. So that's when you connect to one server and then to another, and use VPN that way. We have just recently launched the WireGuard version of the multi-hop, and I use it personally, and it's pretty fast. So yeah, and Other thing is our anti-tracker, which is a little bit going away from the VPN, let's do one job well thing, but we have added an anti-tracker and ad blocker. Some customers have asked for that, and that's also can be useful to do it at a DNS level. Works similar to like a Pi-hole or stuff like that. So
yeah, I think it's a nice little feature to bundle in, especially because DNS when using a VPN can be pretty important. Yep. So it's nice if the person's going to use your VP or your DNS provider when using VPN. It's nice to have that option to just quickly enable some basic DNS protections around ads and tracking. Nice little feature there. And I think the core thing that you mentioned earlier too is just that you recognize and you're honest about VPNs shifting trust. So it's not that it becomes a trustless thing. It's just that you're deciding when you use a VPN service like IVPN that you trust this company not to be logging, not to be doing these things, to act ethically, to care for your data. And you're saying you trust them more than you trust your ISP. And obviously there are a lot of different ways that you can kind of make that decision for yourself, but a lot of things we talked about already help to inform that decision around, do you trust IVPN more than you trust whatever IP or ISP you have? And especially since the ISP that you use, I think a key piece of that people need to remember is that the ISP has generally all of your personally identifiable information. Like they will generally have name, address, phone number, maybe ID, maybe other things. So shifting the trust away from someone who has all of your personally identifiable information is, I think, almost always a good move in almost any threat model. Obviously not everyone, and everyone needs to decide that for themselves. But shifting that visibility into traffic away from the third party that has your personally identifiable information can be really vital.
Yeah, exactly. And one thing to add to that, in Hungary, and in my personal situation is that my broadband ISP is the same as my mobile carrier, so it's one company. So it's like that even makes it worse in terms of how much information they can immediately correlate. So scary.
Yeah. If you do have that, I would even more highly recommend using a VPN, or if you can switch to not having that data going through the same person. But yeah, the more data points you provide, the more dangerous it can be to you now or in the future.
That's right.
You've mentioned a few, but I wanted to just kind of circle back to what the core limitations or misconceptions are around the privacy that's provided by specifically by a good non-logging VPN like IVPN. Because I think there's a lot of misconceptions in the space about what VPNs do and don't do. So I'd love to hear your thoughts around the kind of the core limitations of VPN or the misconceptions around it.
Sure. Yeah. This is a big topic, and it's kind of like a pet peeve of mine. And this is what drove me to writing blog posts about this and some projects. But yeah, I mean, VPNs don't do a lot of things that people assume, either by looking at the ads and have a feel for what they might do, or just have these vague promises. So VPNs won't stop you from tech giants tracking you, for example. Many other ways to do that. You can solve one part of that with the IP shifting, but device fingerprinting, persistent cookies through the browser. If they own a browser, and one of them happen to do that. So so it really is just should be a part of a toolkit, as I said, and it's not a one button solution. And I think it's very harmful that many providers run with these kind of ads. And VPN won't protect you from a passive global adversary that can monitor all traffic. And it definitely won't protect you from targeted surveillance. So that's the other thing that I see in the chat communities, people coming in, popping up I have a question, someone is after me, and I don't know. So it's not going to help you. It's not going to help you. And if someone thinks that it's going to help them, and they do something silly, then it's just way worse than they have this false sense of security. So that's my biggest issue with this. And depending on the threat model, as we talked about, that you might need Tor, which is better for anonymity, but suffers from some issues, as some of your guests have talked about in previous episodes. But really, so you might need not a VPN at all. If you trust your ISP, or you're absolutely not concerned about any of these for any reason, you just want, I don't know, hide your financial transactions, or something like that, and you don't care about that part, then you might not need a VPN. And yeah, that's an important takeaway, I think. And most of your listeners probably need one, but some of their friends or their grandma, might not need one. I don't know. And this is why we have wrote posts like why you don't need a VPN, and this is why we have created the tool. I think you mentioned it in the show notes that or the sponsor notes that doIneedAVPN.com, which specifically collects the different issues that people might have around privacy, and they can select them. And if you select stop social media tracking and hiding financial transactions, then this tool will spit out you don't need a VPN. It's not going to help you. It's not going to save you. So yeah, it's a complex topic. And everyone needs to do their own assessment on this.
Yeah, it's definitely one we could spend a lot more time looking at, and like you mentioned, we've spent a good amount of time talking about it in a couple of the previous episodes of Opt Out. But I think the key thing there for me is that it's a piece of the toolkit, and it may not even be the first piece of the toolkit that you put in place, even though I'd argue that usually it should be pretty early, but it's not going to solve all of your privacy issues in one go. You really need to bundle it with, like you mentioned, using a good browser, using good privacy preserving extensions, maybe using a different operating system. There's a lot of different things that go into personal privacy, and it's not just slap a VPN on it and call it a day. And that the Do I Need a VPN tool is so awesome. I love that you have created a tool entirely designed to tell some people that they shouldn't pay for your service. I think that's just an awesome thing that I've never seen anyone else do. So it's cool to see people who are willing to actively dissuade potential customers in order to protect their privacy and to not make false claims. So it's a great little approach there.
Thanks. Yeah, and it's open source. So if you if you go on the site and find something that you disagree with, or it's outdated or anything else, we are happy to change it. Just create an issue on GitHub, and we can work together on it.
Awesome. I also wanted to just give you the chance to share any future plans for IVPN that listeners should know about.
Future plans, yeah. I mentioned GitHub. I think most of our stuff is like visible and accessible, what we're working on right now. We want to create a better roadmap, make it public. There are some drawbacks and challenges with that, we make a promise and we don't keep it by the time we estimated it, and some stuff like that. But generally, it's also increases transparency, and people can see that what they can expect from the service. So we'd like to do something like that. We mentioned anti-tracker. We want to improve that a little bit. We haven't done that since we had added to the service, but we have some requests about that. We're working on Linux split tunneling. It's high priority now.
Oh, nice.
So yeah, that's we recently added on other platforms. So that's on the product side. On the infrastructure side, this is going to be a big focus for next year. Improve on our infrastructure. This is not my focus area, but I'm aware of the goals and the plans. So we want to add more own servers, and we're also looking at progressing towards some sort of open source infrastructure. So there are some experiments by Mulvad around this. They have a project called System Transparency, which is pretty interesting. So we are looking at that as well. So yeah, we're not working directly with them, but yeah, we definitely have the same goals and the same ideas. So yeah, that's an interesting project.
Awesome.
And go ahead.
Oh, you finish up?
No, I wanted to jump on some other stuff. So
yeah, no, I was just going to say I look forward to checking those out, especially the split tunneling on Linux. I think it'd be helpful for me and for a lot of people I know that use Linux for their daily driver.
Definitely, it's been requested many times. So in the past couple of weeks. So yeah, that's a priority. Yeah, and besides this, like more content and guides, and perhaps experimenting with other formats, to talk about IVPN and our operation and our plans and our ethics and stuff like that. So like education, further the cause through education, and if not doing it by ourselves, then at least sponsor great creators like the host of the show. So that's the idea.
It's a good segue. My next question was, what made you decide to partner with Opt Out and support the show financially?
Yeah, we've been listeners since we've discovered it. I think I've discovered you through Henry from Techlore.
Oh, nice.
He was an early guest, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Overall great episodes and great guest selection and format, and it's become an essential listen for me. And I think there is a lot of room for much more like audio and video content in this mold. And for us, it's a great fit with what we would like to achieve as a venture. So we plan to sponsor more creators, who raise awareness and educate about privacy and the tools. And I think this is the best use of any profits we can think of. That was the idea all along. That the profits we generate, like a big chunk of that would be reinvested in education and sponsorships. To help this whole thing gain more awareness.
It's just awesome to hear that people who create an awesome privacy product that I use are also listening to the show. It's very very humbling and honoring. It's been cool to hear that from multiple different people, and just to hear that you specifically have listened to the show is really, really just crazy to think about. But I love that y'all have decided to continue that focus around broader privacy and not just tunneling everything into growing IVPN like you talked about, but realizing that there's such a desperate need for education in this space, desperate need for more honest, nuanced content creators that are willing to delve into the nitty gritty and the pros and cons and look at the different aspects of personal privacy. So I'm glad that y'all are doing that, and I'm just grateful that there's more money flowing into that scene, and really just that y'all are also creating excellent educational content as well. I think it goes a long way to speak to the ethics behind IVPN. So I'm hopeful to see more of that content out of y'all, and obviously excited what this sponsorship will help to enable me to do. Hopefully continue to expand and maybe even start doing some video content moving forward. So excited for that, but definitely very grateful for the sponsorship.
Great to hear that. Yeah, if you don't mind, one more thought about this. Mm-hmm. I think the trickiest thing for us is like where to put that sponsorship money and with who to sponsor. I mean, everyone knows that like all the YouTubers out there and all the big sponsorships with the big ticket name, VPN firms. You have a YouTuber with millions of followers doing unboxing or something like that, and they have no business in recommending tools like this, and they have no business in. They cannot properly vet them. They don't understand the nuances and the threat models and everything else, and they just accept the money, and the VPN companies just pay that money. So we don't want to participate in that at all, and that's why we haven't done any kind of sponsorships. Mostly, we don't want to do this. No offense to unboxing YouTubers. If anyone is an unboxing YouTuber listening to it, I have nothing against you. Just don't accept VPN sponsorships. So yeah, I mean, my point here is that it's really encouraging to see people like Henry, for example, and yourself, and I hope more and more people are going to
absolutely
get into this and try it and try this education, and if they have the knack for it and have the willingness to put themselves out there and invest the time for it, we should work together and find ways to reward and grow this whole let's say ecosystem or something like that. So we are very much down with that idea long term. So yeah,
I'm very hopeful that more and more people will step up to create educational content in the privacy space. I think there's a lot less than I expected when I got into this, and a lot less that really put a ton of time and effort into it. So I'm hopeful. I do not want a monopoly on this. I'm sure like Henry from Techlore does not want a monopoly on this. I want other people stepping up and doing this, hopefully better than I'm doing it. So I'm really am hoping that people listening to this, people reading IVPN's privacy stuff, people enjoying content from Techlore will make the conscious decision to think about how can I give back, and is this something I could actually help with, and is there content I can create around privacy? And I hope that ecosystem will continue to grow and grow quickly, because it is very, very much needed.
Agreed.
I also wanted to just hear if there are any other specific privacy tools that you would generally recommend people to take a look at, and then why.
Sure. I think I mentioned like browser extensions that I use, uBlock Origin and Decentralize. I think they are good
Nice
first steps if you're just starting out or like getting started with this.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, what comes to mind are the some of the big names. Well, big names in our circles, let's say. But I really like projects that manage to solve like the onboarding, first obstacles, network effects, the usability issues like this, and they combine it with like great gains in privacy and security. Mm-hmm. So I think that's the way forward to onboard like a large number of users for massive privacy gains overall. Like Signal is a very good example of that. I know there's some question marks over the phone number requirement, depending on your level of I don't know, purism or something like that. but yeah, I think it's a great intersection of like great UX, great privacy and security. And yeah, I've onboarded many relatives through like saying that I only send family photos on Signal. So now I'm talking to grandparents and friends and some great uncles and whatever on Signal. I don't have a Facebook and Messenger. I don't want to use WhatsApp. So yeah, now like there is some friction. Some of them don't answer for a week, but I consider this one of the big wins for me in terms of privacy. So that's good. And Bitwarden would be in the similar mold. I'm a heavy user. It's a password manager that I think it's has a really good background with the privacy and security aspects, but it's still very usable, so user friendly. I really like that. Mm-hmm. And perhaps on the IVPN side, so like running a business, we think about this a lot. And if you listen to this and you have your own business, or you do transactions and you accept money, or you have some subscriptions and you have your own website, I think two things would be important to note here. One is that you don't have to use Google Analytics. So there are great alternatives. We use Matomo, which is open source, and we host it ourselves. There is no information passed on. We just remove the last 2 octets of the IPs, and the functionality is pretty well built out. And for like, let's say, basic analytics, it's excellent. So yeah, you don't have to use a third party for this. That's one. And the second thing is what you mentioned. I mean, we have our own BTC pay server, so we accept BTC directly. And with Monero, we run our own node, and we accept Monero directly with a custom implementation. But it's my point here is that this is pretty easy nowadays, especially. So if you want to, improve those aspects of your business, even if a VPN provider is listening to this, please do it. And yeah, that would be a great step, because if you cut out the middleman, that's good for everyone except the middleman, I guess. But yeah, that's my message here.
I think we have a surprising crossover of apps that we use. It's cool to see your list echoing a lot of the ones that I've recommended broadly. 2 quick notes on the things you mentioned. I think for Signal, sure. I think you hit the nail on the head that for me, it's the perfect example of perfect not being the enemy of good, or perfect being the enemy of good. Sorry, can't get the phrase right. And just that, like, yes, it's not an absolutely perfect tool, and there are things I would like to change, but it is an excellent first step in people's privacy journey. Yeah. And that's the only messenger I can think of that's thoroughly privacy preserving that I could have gotten all of my family and friends on. And I currently have every single family member and every single friend using Signal with me. And that's not something I can say about a lot of other privacy tools, and especially not messenger apps. So I think it's a very good balance, and there are definitely things that I would love to see changed. But I think they've done a good job of balancing UX and UI and really focusing on still providing strong privacy throughout that. And the Bitward as well is a huge one that I've used. And just a little note, I don't know if anyone else has seen, but you can use organizations within Bitwarden.
Yep.
And it's a great way to either use it within a company or small team, or like between your spouse. Like me and my wife are part of an organization, so that we can share credentials and she can have access to the things that she needs to, that maybe I generated or use more regularly. So it's a cool way to be able to share those credentials without having to actually like copy and paste them back and forth or that kind of thing.
Yeah, and it's pretty easy. And if you have people coming from, I don't know, LastPass or 1Password, or there is not a big learning curve. So it's pretty straightforward.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, last question I had for you, Victor, is just how can listeners learn more about IVPN? And then what are the best ways that they can support what you're doing with IVPN?
The first point of contact, I think, would be our website. If you haven't heard about us, like you can find all the information about our policies and guides and ethics, all this kind of stuff, and the product if you're interested. We have pretty active communities: Mastodon, Reddit, some other platforms. And what else? Well, yeah, I mentioned GitHub already. You can review our code, submit requests, issues. Some customers do that, or correct some errors and copy and point out different things. So that's very useful. Really like to keep our ears on the ground and look for feedback from customers. So that would be appreciated. That's about it.
Awesome. Yeah, I will definitely make sure to have all of those and some more links that I found helpful in the show notes, so people can quickly jump in and learn more.
Excellent.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for jumping on, Victor. It was a pleasure for me to just be able to get to learn a little bit more about you personally and about what IVPN is doing. And I really hope that this will help listeners make a well-informed decision. Obviously, I'm not forcing everyone to use IVPN or telling them it's the only solution, but I think obviously it's been the right choice for myself. I've loved everything that I've gotten to learn about the way IVPNs run, and I hope that people will consider it and just consider the broader idea of whether or not a VPN fits their threat model. So thanks for coming on and giving so much detail and insight.
Yeah, great to hear all that. Appreciate it. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thanks for listening, and I hope you enjoyed this episode of Opt Out. If you did, please take a moment and subscribe to the podcast, or if you're already subscribed, share it with one friend or family member this week. As always, you can check out the link to the guest content and contact info, as well as links to all of the tools we discussed in today's episode. Now get out there and opt out this week.